They have decided to halt certain weapons shipments right when every moment could tip the balance of an entire nation's fate. That, my friends, is the thunderous statement that caught global attention just a few days ago. If you have been following the unfolding drama of international politics, you probably guessed it. The White House has confirmed that the United States is pausing some crucial deliveries of arms to Ukraine, even as the conflict with Russia escalates. Whispers of controversy, urgent meetings behind closed doors, and frantic media speculation have turned the entire conversation into an international spectacle. Why would Washington impose this sudden halt? How is Moscow reacting to the news? And most importantly, what does it all mean for Ukrainian forces on the ground, and for the rest of us observing, head in hands, asking ourselves, is this the turning point in a bitter fight for self-determination? Today, we will piece together these fragments of information, delve into the unexpected reasons behind the pause, and uncover the deeper geopolitical tensions that continue to shape the entire region. In this episode, we will unravel the White House's official position and find out who stands to gain and who might be left reeling. We will also discuss the remarkable swirl of events swirling around President Donald Trump, who, in a sharply worded press statement, seemed to suggest that America's own military stocks might be stretched to an alarming limit. Then we will look at how Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is attempting to stay poised amid a flurry of tense negotiations, especially after a reported confrontation with Trump that left both leaders sizing each other up across an Oval Office desk. And if that were not enough, we will dive into a recent phone call between French President Emmanuel Macron and Vladimir Putin, an exchange that had not happened in over 2.5 years, raising more questions than answers about the possible directions this conflict could still take. So, grab a comfortable seat, because we are about to journey through a labyrinth of high-stakes deals, strategic caution, and the unmistakable chill of a war that has already defied the expectations of many. Tensions, as you likely know, have reached a fever pitch ever since Russian forces crossed into Ukrainian territory in February of 2022. The global community watched with a collective jolt as entire regions were transformed into military zones. Families packed up and fled in the dead of night, and heads of state scrambled to plan their next moves. Now, well over a year later, we might have guessed that Western powers, led prominently by the United States, would remain fully committed to pumping aid into Ukraine for as long as it took. But the White House's recent announcement has introduced a sobering reality check. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told reporters that after a Department of Defense review, the United States decided to halt some shipments so it could put America's interests first. Quite a jarring statement, is it not? For some, it emphasizes caution on the part of American officials who fear the possibility of overextending military stockpiles. For others, it sounds like a dangerous wavering of resolve at a critical juncture in Ukraine's war for survival. So, what does this mean for the United States' broader role in European security? The phrase "America's interests first" echoes loudly in the corridors of global diplomacy. Critics are quick to pounce, suggesting this may signal a pivot to a more isolationist stance, reminiscent of hints that President Donald Trump dropped during his campaigns, when he voiced that America should not be the world's policeman. On the other hand, it may also simply be a matter of prudent resource management. Officials across Washington have expressed concerns that the United States, after sending tens of billions of dollars worth of sophisticated armor, missiles, and other equipment, needs to ensure its own readiness in case another urgent crisis erupts. Here is where it gets even more interesting. Elbridge Colby, the United States Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, confirmed that the suspension is restricted to certain types of weaponry. According to inside reports, the paused shipments may include some air defense missiles and precision munitions that many see as vital to Ukraine's ongoing resistance. Colby assured the public that the White House and the Department of Defense continue to provide the president with robust options to further support Ukraine if necessary. But the underlying shift in tone cannot be ignored. It reveals a growing awareness that the demands of a prolonged war could erode the nation's own strategic reserves. At the same time, the rhetorical chess game surrounding these weapons shipments has become a heated political flashpoint. President Trump, never one to mince words, has expressed strong reservations for quite a while. Even prior to the recent White House announcement, rumors circulated that top members of the current administration had begun an internal audit to measure how rapidly American arsenals were being depleted. More than a few analysts have suggested that the recent decision is a direct result of Trump's camp pressing the issue. It is easy to picture fervent strategy sessions in the White House and the Pentagon, with generals huddled around a round table, verifying stockpiles and making calls to arms manufacturers, double-checking production capabilities. But let us not forget, the story is also unfolding on the other side of the Atlantic. Ukrainian leaders have maintained a firm stance that Western military support remains indispensable. The country's defense forces have, by many experts' accounts, punched well above what the Kremlin initially expected. Still, that success is largely owed to Western intelligence sharing and the advanced weapon systems that have been pouring into the country since the start of the conflict. In that light, the potential reduction in military deliveries from the United States has some observers speculating about a shift in the front lines. Could this be the moment Russia has been waiting for? A slight, yet potentially significant easing of Western involvement? Or will Ukraine improvise ways to cope without certain shipments while awaiting a new wave of Allied support? Your guess might be as good as mine, but to truly see the dynamics at play, we should rewind a few months to the vivid scene mentioned earlier, that confrontation between President Trump and President Zelensky. It was in March of this year when Zelensky, fresh from pleading with various European leaders for additional defenses, arrived in Washington. By most accounts, there was little fanfare, just the quiet hush of tension seeping through the corridors. Then came the Oval Office meeting, described as heated by those who witnessed it. Exactly what was said remains behind a curtain of official secrecy, but we do know that Trump emerged from the conversation visibly frustrated, soon announcing he was pausing military aid to Ukraine that the previous Biden administration had earmarked. Trump also cut back on intelligence sharing. Those restrictions were eventually lifted, but the seeds of concern about ongoing support had already been planted. And so, we find ourselves here, with the White House unveiling a partial halt on new shipments. Some of them, ironically, the same Patriot anti-missile systems that Zelensky once hailed as a critical life jacket for Ukrainian cities. There is a particularly telling snippet from Trump's conversation with reporters at the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Summit in the Netherlands, where he casually remarked, "We are going to see if we can make some of them available." That non-committal language underscores the uneasy balancing act the administration is trying to maintain. Just how many Patriot systems is Washington willing to transfer abroad if American defense stockpiles are, in Trump's words, already dangerously thin? Some commentators worry that forging a compromise here could send a message to allies that the United States might not be the steadfast partner it has claimed to be in tough times. If this story has gripped you so far, and you believe more people should hear about what may be at stake, consider offering a quick thumbs up. Sharing the story helps us reach more perspectives, and every voice counts when matters are this urgent. Now, no conversation about dwindling American stockpiles would be complete without mentioning the growing friction in multiple world theaters. We have seen increased tensions with Iran, heightened strategic competition with China, and concerns about potential flashpoints in other corners of the globe. According to spokesperson Anna Kelly, the White House wants to preserve U.S. forces' readiness for administration defense priorities. That stiff language can be translated to mean that the United States is keeping one eye on Ukraine and the other on whatever might come next. It likely includes everything from the situation in the South China Sea to possible threats in the Middle East, not to mention the always unpredictable nature of international terror networks. The last thing Washington wants is to be caught off guard if another major crisis flares up, especially now that the world seems more volatile than at any point in recent memory. Then consider how overshadowed Europe's authorities might feel. While institutions like the European Union have stepped up to offer billions of euros in commitments, some have argued that the brunt of Ukraine's immediate needs has rested on American shoulders. If Washington starts pulling back, will Europe collectively fill that gap? Emmanuel Macron's recent phone call with Vladimir Putin might hold a clue. It was, by all accounts, a lengthy exchange, over 2 hours. It was also the first time in over 2.5 years that the two leaders had a direct conversation of that magnitude. French official statements said that Macron emphasized the need for a ceasefire in Ukraine, while Putin responded by blaming the West for the conflict. He claimed that the West had ignored Russia's security interests for many years, creating an anti-Russian bridgehead in Ukraine. It reads almost like the prologue to a Cold War thriller. The lines are drawn, the rhetoric is charged, and the only question is which domino falls next. Of course, Russia has hardly been idle on the battlefield. Indeed, it stepped up its war efforts in a dramatic fashion recently by unleashing one of the largest aerial bombardments of Ukrainian territory since the start of the conflict. Reports say upwards of 500 different types of weapons, including drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, rained down. The psychological effect alone cannot be overstated, with Ukrainian citizens scrambling to find shelter in their own neighborhoods. Then came the news that 3 people were killed in a Ukrainian attack on a Russian factory in Izhevsk, more than 1,000 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. This is a chilling reminder of how deep the strikes are now reaching, both physically and psychologically. For those who closely track the lines on a map, it appears Russia has a secure hold over roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory, including the peninsula of Crimea, annexed back in 2014. Ukrainian forces, once outgunned in nearly every major category, have found ways to wage an effective resistance. But that success depends in large part on continued deliveries of advanced systems from the West. So, let us not sugarcoat the situation. The White House's decision to halt certain weapon shipments, even if it is described as partial, could change the dynamics. The timing could not be more critical, especially if you believe the statements that Russia might be gearing up for further escalations. It is fascinating to note that in late April, the United States and Ukraine signed a deal granting American access to certain Ukrainian mineral reserves in exchange for various types of military assistance. On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward arrangement that exemplified the growing partnership. But is this new partial freeze a sign that such deals are in jeopardy? Or could it be an indicator that Washington wants to renegotiate terms or simply keep its options open? Observers who fear a new wave of resource diplomacy might be quick to draw parallels to historical episodes when nations parlayed strategic resources into sweeping defense pacts. And as in those cases, the devil often resides in the details that the public never sees. What of the Ukrainian people themselves? Their government has declined to comment on the announcement so far, perhaps hoping that behind-the-scenes diplomacy can reverse the policy or, at the very least, limit the negative impact on their defensive capability. Ukrainian public opinion remains fiercely in favor of continued Western cooperation. They have seen the face of war at its most harrowing, with entire neighborhoods shattered and daily life hanging by a thread. Another large portion of the population recognizes that without reliable support from countries like the United States, they risk a prolonged or stalemated conflict, which could morph into decades of further instability. International watchers also point to the possibility of ramping up production lines within the United States. Could we see the largest arms manufacturers press to churn out defense systems at rates not seen since the height of major 20th century conflicts? There are rumors about expansions in missile production capabilities and advanced research into new drone technologies. Already, some industry insiders note that arms contractors have been hiring specialized engineers, technicians, and supply chain experts to meet surging global demand. Yet all of that takes time, months or even years, to yield the desired output. It is in these layers of complicated strategic decisions that the White House must walk a fine line, reassure international allies that the United States remains committed to Ukraine's fight, and also manage the real constraints of internal defense priorities. It is a balancing act, reminiscent of a tightrope walker suspended high above the ground, with global media, policy experts, and foreign leaders waiting to see if the next step is sure, or if there is a wobbly miscalculation. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has cast a watchful eye toward other European nations who might momentarily close the gap if American shipments slow. Germany and the United Kingdom have already supplied certain equipment, but no single European power can match the industrial might, intelligence capabilities, and logistical support that the United States provides. Meanwhile, tensions in global circles continue to simmer. Iran, for instance, interprets any sign of diminished American readiness as an opportunity to expand its own regional influence. And in the Far East, China observes the United States' resource allocation decisions with particular interest, seeing if the superpower is more vulnerable or less prepared for a standoff over Taiwan or other disputed areas. Indeed, some geopolitical pundits speculate that the White House has chosen this moment to scale back certain shipments precisely because it anticipates a more urgent challenge from other quarters. The phrase, "just ask Iran," used sarcastically by White House spokesperson Anna Kelly when emphasizing that the United States forces remain strong, underscores how officials want to project confidence to adversaries, even while pulling back from direct commitments. This swirling maze of factors creates an extraordinary moment in global politics. Rarely do we see so many interconnected threads. On one side, we have the immediate and very human tragedy unfolding in Ukraine, where entire provinces live under the threat of bombs raining down from the sky, and families cling to the hope that Western allies will continue to supply a lifeline of advanced weaponry. On the other, we have a major global power that is second-guessing, or at least recalibrating its willingness to extend unlimited support. Just how far the ripple effects will travel is still unknown. Could we see friction with other NATO allies who believe the United States should stay the course no matter the cost? Will Russia take the partial halt as a sign of weakness and push more aggressively, potentially igniting a broader crisis? Some analysts have even raised the haunting specter of nuclear brinkmanship, pointing out that if the Russian leadership interprets a shift in Western posture as an invitation to test the boundaries, it could lead to a scenario no one wants, an even more escalatory confrontation. That is why the phone call between Macron and Putin is so intriguing. Is European diplomatic outreach a genuine attempt to broker a ceasefire, or simply a feint to gauge Putin's intentions? The Kremlin's official statements suggest it feels justified in its actions, citing years of perceived Western disregard for Russian security concerns. Regardless of one's personal stance, it is clear that reconciling these vastly different narratives will not happen overnight. And here we must pause for just a moment, because the story might already have you on the edge of your seat. If you are appreciating the depth of these revelations and want to be part of future discussions, consider subscribing. That way, the next time we break down a high-stakes global development, you will be right here with us, following every twist. Returning to our narrative, it is crucial to remember that global conflicts are seldom resolved by one party's decisions alone. As rocky as United States-Ukraine relations may look right now, there is every reason to believe that key figures on both sides are working around the clock to avoid letting this partial halt morph into a broader policy meltdown. Indeed, Anna Kelly confirmed that the Department of Defense remains ready to pivot or adjust its strategies according to the president's directives. Should intel come in that Russia is preparing a major push, it is entirely possible that shipments could resume with renewed urgency. Nevertheless, the situation is a potent reminder that political will is a finite resource, subject to intense domestic debates and the evolving priorities of an administration. Public support in the United States for aiding Ukraine has historically been strong, but as the conflict drags on, voices calling for a more inward-looking approach have grown louder. Earlier this year, hawkish politicians argued that overextending the national defense infrastructure would be a blunder if a separate crisis demands American firepower. And that viewpoint, once considered marginal, suddenly becomes more mainstream the longer the war continues, without a clear path to peace. All the while, Ukraine must weigh its military strategy carefully. With Russia escalating missile and drone assaults, Ukrainian defense systems have become all the more critical. Can Ukrainian forces hold off sustained bombing campaigns without fresh deliveries from the United States? Or, in a more optimistic scenario, will other allies step up, bridging the gap so that the difference is barely felt on the front lines? The lack of definitive information about exactly which shipments are halted leaves those questions unanswered, for now. And unanswered questions can be more destabilizing than outright refusals, at least psychologically, for a country that is trying to coordinate an allied defense effort across multiple time zones and bureaucracies. Meanwhile, the rumor mill spins, with some insiders floating the notion that the White House might be aiming to nudge European allies into carrying a heavier share of the load. After all, the war is right on Europe's doorstep, and perhaps American officials believe it is time for European leaders to boost their defense production and budgets, a move that some countries have been reluctant to undertake. If the White House is indeed using this partial halt as a diplomatic bargaining chip, the next few weeks could reveal hidden tensions among NATO members that have been papered over by unified statements of solidarity. We should also consider the possibility that the partial halt in deliveries is tied to the mysterious references to new intelligence. Could it be that a faction within Washington is concerned about how effectively Ukraine can integrate certain advanced weapons systems? Did they fear that some technology might be at risk of capture by Russian forces, potentially compromising American security if certain cutting-edge systems were dissected by adversarial scientists? Officially, the White House has not framed it that way, but it would not be the first time concerns about technology security influenced foreign policy decisions. In the swirling midst of these events, it is easy to forget how quickly alliances can shift in the kaleidoscope of international politics. But for now, the big headlines are dominated by the simple but impactful news. The United States has halted certain key weapons shipments to Ukraine. It is a partial halt. It may be temporary, but in a war of attrition, every day counts. And so the focus remains on whether this decision marks a turning point. Will it embolden Russia, force Ukraine to adapt, or drive Europe to take on a bigger role in supporting Kyiv? Could it even spark internal rifts within NATO, or will the alliance remain steadfast despite the shifting approach from its most powerful member? Perhaps the moral of the story is that no armed conflict ever exists in a vacuum. Domestic politics, international rivalries, and the tangible limits of national stockpiles all converge at times like this, leaving leaders with impossibly complex decisions. It is not merely a question of, are we supporting Ukraine or not, but rather, how do we best preserve broader stability, calibrate our resources, and not lose sight of multiple emerging threats? While that might be the language of grand strategy, it offers little comfort to civilians crouching in basements in eastern Ukraine, hearing bombs rumble overhead, wondering if a fresh supply of interceptor missiles will arrive in time to stave off the next assault. It is also cold solace to those who believe unwavering American leadership is the key to discouraging authoritarian regimes from testing their might. By now, we have covered a wide range of angles, yet so many questions remain unanswered, and events continue to develop at breakneck speed. The shaky ceasefire calls, the possible shifts in the domestic American political landscape, the reaction of European allies, and the known unpredictability of the Kremlin's next move all swirl up into a dramatic tapestry. And that is precisely why we will keep watching every bit of news from Washington to Kyiv, from Paris to Moscow, from Brussels to Beijing, and everywhere in between. We are in an era where a decision in one corner of the world can create massive consequences for the rest. As we wrap up, stay vigilant, stay informed, and be ready for surprises. Geopolitics has a dark sense of humor, and it never misses a chance to throw in a curveball when everyone expects a fastball. Above all, continue questioning the statements and the spin that come out of official channels, because the state of play is never as straightforward as it seems on a podium or in a press briefing. Thank you for traveling with me through this maze of international intrigue, suspense, and high stakes. What happens next could shape the future of an entire region and impact global power structures for years. It is a story that we will continue telling, analyzing, and dissecting. Remember to stay tuned, keep your eyes on the headlines, and watch how quickly the chessboard can change in a conflict where every piece is a potential game changer.